Yeah, I mean, the only thing I really don't like, I mean, I don't like a few things about boats that in terms of implementation. One of the things is because we're on a grid, rather than like pushy 3D models that can just kind of push stuff gently out of the way of their kind of aura of hitboxes and collision mechanics. It's like when we move a grid square, then it's sort of all or nothing, right? It's like there used to be two mer people in the sea in front of your boat, but now that sea has teleported behind your boat, and we're probably not going to want to teleport the mer people behind your boat. But what if the terrain narrows? What if the boat's like running up against a cliff? Well, maybe you squash them at that point, but should they get pushed out to the side? Is there a side? Do you have to do all kinds of flood fills every time that a boat moves to kind of slosh anything that gets in the way out to proper squares and stuff? That part seems kind of annoying. Um, and then there's the matter of like pathfinding stuff. Like if a person's on a boat and they're thinking they're just in the middle of a combat or something, so there's all kinds of like paths, little paths all over the place, and a lot of them are going on like the shore, and that this boat is kind of scraping along. Then when the boat moves, do we want to try to repair the paths? Do we want to cut the paths and take the FPS hit? So it's similar in that way to how fluids flow and block off passageways and stuff, except now it's a whole ass map that's just kind of moving in another map. It's just sort of the same as the sort of moving fortress sections problem. It's like you have this map moving within another map. How do you maintain pathing information? It's kind of a tricky question. And then yeah, those are basically the two problems, related problems, just kind of how things scrape together and move around. I think other issues with them are easier to handle. I mean, treating it as a contiguous thing is not so bad. I think there's probably a problem with having them leave the screen, especially as you allow your boats to get bigger and bigger. You kind of want to have this feeling of them being able to go off the screen tile by tile. But if you let them go off the screen tile by tile, then the people on the boat are kind of half in, half out, and have this kind of weird relationship with space as they're being de-resed piece by piece, that maybe it's best for the boat to just pop out, but then do you have like a whole ass 20 tile long boat just popping in and popping out? Like the popping in boat is kind of a more irritating problem than the pushing boat in a sense. So that'd be something to consider. And then there's the additional thing that's annoying about boats, which is the directions that they can travel. And the turning, like a boat that turns from east to north, if you picture a 15 tile boat turning from east to north, then it causes problems. I mean, I've seen other implementations of it. Like if I recollect, some version of Cataclysm had shear, like you'd shear the some of the tiles upward. That doesn't really work for us, because it breaks wrestling. It breaks a bunch of issues. I mean, a bunch of issues come up with how our game works when you shear. So we'd rather not shear, but then we're stuck with the four directions, which is something that I can live with, I think, dealing with four. Maybe it's just because I grew up on Ultima or something where all the boats are kind of pointing in directions like that. But I'm perfectly happy with popping. But it does lead to a popping effect, like when you're headed east and then you start headed a little bit north and your boat is going like over up, over up. That's fine. And then when your boat is going exactly northeast, does it remain kind of pointing east and just go over up, or just I'd rather just diagonal, going up? And then when does it pop? Does it pop north? And you don't want the pop to be just at 45 degrees. You'd rather have the pop be at like 50 and 55 or 60 and 30, and going back and forth, so that you don't have like a flimmery pop, right? And etc. That's why boats are a pain in the ass.